Well, for years, one number in Russia has barely moved, and that's President Vladimir Putin's approval rating, parked comfortably above 70%, no matter what happened at home or on the battlefield. But now that seems to be changing. I want you to look at this graph. Now, this is Vladimir Putin's own state pollster. It's known as, did you see right there, Legitimacy, tracking his approval week by week over the past year. What you're seeing is a steady slide down to 65.1%. That's the most recent figure released today. And that is the lowest number recorded since before Russia's war against Ukraine began more than 4 years ago. All right, here to unpack what is behind these numbers is Jenny Mathers, an expert on Russian politics at Aberystwyth University in Wales. It's good to have you on the program. Let me just start with this number, 65.1%. How much should we trust a number like that, since it is coming from a Russian state pollster?
I think that we have to assume that the number is a bit exaggerated, because not just because it's coming from a pollster that's associated with the Russian state, but because Russians in the current environment are quite cautious about expressing opposition to Putin or skepticism about the government. And so, it's surprising that it has fallen that low. It's likely that the true number, if people were free to express their actual views, would be quite a bit lower. So, we have to take these kinds of poll figures with a grain of salt. But certainly the changes over time, I think, are the significant things to pay attention to.
And it is a very high number. I can imagine for most Western leaders, if they had that type of approval, they would be ready to, to pop the champagne and toast themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you compare this with President Zelensky in Ukraine, his approval ratings are down in the 30s, 30 percentiles. So, yes, absolutely. The comparison is quite striking at one level. But then, of course, if you look at someone like Winston Churchill in the Second World War, he had sky-high approval ratings through much of the war. So I think much depends on the war itself as well as the leader.
Should Vladimir Putin, should he be worried, though, that we are seeing a downward trend in this approval rating number? I mean, is his authority, questioned at all with this?
Yes, I think it is. I mean, people are often surprised to hear that authoritarian regimes actually crave legitimacy. But if you think about how much effort goes into managing elections in Russia, for example, and how much effort goes into managing Putin's sort of personal brand and his appearance and the image of him as a strong leader, physically capable and mentally sharp and all the rest of it, then yes, these kinds of things do matter. I think authoritarian leaders do feel the need to be seen to be legitimate. And part of that is, social approval and public opinion polls and these kinds of things. So yes, they do matter. The fact that the numbers are going down in such a tightly controlled society suggests that things are going wrong, and that Putin doesn't have the confidence of society, and presumably also not necessarily the confidence of the elites and the interest groups around him.
We know that for years the Kremlin has tried to shield ordinary Russians from the costs of the war in Ukraine. Do you think that strategy is becoming harder to sustain? And do these numbers, do they suggest that there is growing anti-war sentiment?
I think it is becoming harder and harder to shield most ordinary Russians, particularly the ones in the larger cities, from the impact of the war. And for a long time, this was sort of the informal bargain that Putin had made with a lot of Russians is, the war will go on, but you don't really have to worry about it affecting your daily life very much. Now, with Ukraine's strategy of attacking Russian oil facilities and increasing drone strikes, even in big cities, even in Moscow, I think more and more Russians are seeing the war affecting them personally, and not being happy with it, basically. So I'm not sure whether it's anti-war necessarily, in the fact that many Russians apparently, as far as we can tell, don't necessarily oppose the war and don't necessarily sympathize with Ukraine. But I certainly don't think that they approve of the fact that they're having to suffer, and that they are seeing a great deal of discomfort, shall we say, and inconvenience in their daily lives.
Let me just ask you, Jay, we've got about 20 seconds. What about just fatigue? Is it possible that this number is giving us information or insight into war fatigue, or or economic fatigue?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the economic situation in Russia is becoming much, much tougher, much tighter for ordinary people. And I think, it's just becoming much more difficult for Putin to maintain this facade that everything is going well.
Jenny Mathers from Aberystwyth University in Wales, we appreciate your time and your insights tonight. Thank you.
Well, Ekaterina Schulmann is one of the leading observers of Russia's political system. She's currently with the Carnegie of Russia Eurasia Center. Welcome to DW. How concerned do you think the Kremlin is by these falling approval numbers?
Approval ratings matter where there are free elections. So if none of the respondents are actual voters, the opinion of people who have no choice can't matter that much. On the other hand, no dictatorship rules in a vacuum. Autocracies do need, if not support, which implies the possibility of refusal, but at least some sort of passive acceptance of the powers that be. So declining ratings do not matter in the way they matter in electoral democracies. I don't think they will affect the preordained results of the next parliamentary elections in any way. The instruments developed for managing electoral process will guarantee whatever result is needed. So there's the barring of access to actual electoral participation, as has been shown in the previous story of Boris Nadezhdin. And there's the technical miracle of electronic voting, which is managed by the FSB and is absolutely sure to deliver whatever KPI has been set previously.
Right.
And additionally, these days, yes, there are the so-called new territories of the Russian Federation, the imaginary subjects of Russia, where no matter if there are any live people or not, you may be sure that since these territories are in the Russian constitution, they will vote, and the voters' turnout will be close to 100%. So you will understand that in this situation, opinion of the actual electorate doesn't matter that much.
So let me ask a weird question then. So how much does it not matter? Does it not matter to the extent that, as you said, it doesn't matter to the extent that it won't affect the outcome? Does it matter to the extent that people in the Kremlin don't care or will not pass on bad news to President Putin?
These are two different questions. They do care, and we know that by the fact of their extreme attention to all sorts of polling. Russian authorities, Russian political management, the presidential administration are obsessed with polling. So there's a lot of this going on. It seems to me that every adult Russian is being questioned every week of their lives in the working place, in the university, by phone, online, etc. Some of this work is done by FCIOM, the state sociological service, some by other services and firms, but it's evident that an enormous amount of sociological data is being accumulated in the presidential administration. So they do care, and we know that some measures usually are taken when ratings, approval ratings, support ratings, trust ratings start to decline. The second question, whether they pass the bad news to the president, is a different question altogether. For example, the FSO, the Federal Bodyguard Service, basically has its own sociological department. It may seem weird, but it is the fact of Russian administrative life. So they have their own polls. And it is perhaps this kind of information that reaches the president rather than the polls that are accessible to anyone who can go online. So whether he knows it or not is another issue, and frankly, we do not know. But we know that political management is concerned with the state of public opinion.
And why are they obsessed with polling a population that is wary of giving an honest answer?
Because if you can't afford the risks and chances of electoral rotation, you will still be anxious to know what these silent and passive people are actually thinking about. Because you will always be afraid that they may have something on their mind that you will realize when it's too late. I think that there's hardly a chance of protests, not to say revolt, in the current repressive environment of Russia. But still, you see, you can publish any electoral results you want, but you can't make people believe in them. So if there's a general sense of what we in political science would call the loss of legitimacy, it would affect the performance of the system. I said that passive acceptance is necessary, but the bureaucracy itself needs to believe that the authorities are generally supported. Everyone is aware of electoral manipulation, but until quite recently, there has been this general impression that, yes, the results are being doctored, but generally, the president is popular. Generally, United Russia is the most supported party in the country of the very few available parties of choice. If this opinion changes, it will affect the way the system is able to operate, because it consists of people, and they need to trust that they are investing in something that is viable.
Thank you. Ekaterina Schulmann from the Carnegie Russia Eurasia Center.
Thank you.